Hi. Oh. That's nothing. I'm reading The Two Towers. I don't know what that book was. I've only been reading The Two Towers. So that, video's coming, at some point. You didn't see me reading anything else. Alright, obviously the intro wasn't jest, but I am still reading The Two Towers. If you want to know where I'm at, Frodo and Sam are following Gollum in the swamp. I'm like, in terms of, actual book length, I'm like somewhere around here, where this is the side, this is how much I read already, and this is how much I have left to go. That video is gonna come, I'm not gonna say it's not, it's just, that part, honestly, of them going through the swamp it's been slow and kind of boring, and going from the really climactic and, adventurous and armies clashing, first half to that, it's kind of just a little bit of whiplash, so. I randomly decided one day, when I was reading that, this is a book I bought, and it really intrigued me, and I had read a little bit of it, but not really that much, and I decided randomly one day, why don't we just try it again? And it, I read some of it, and it got me hooked. And so then I just, whenever I read something, I was reading this, and as basically like a nice little break where I did the closest I could. I mean, that between other only free time and other hobbies and everything, to kind of like binge reading this. Like, I got this done much faster than I probably would read a book at a normal pace now. But yeah, so let's talk about it. Okay, so the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton is a murder mystery combined with a time loop. This is it's a really interesting book, and something I should say, two things I should say before I start getting into it. Number one, in terms of spoilers, I'm going to have a spoiler-free section that's after this, so I'm going to do what I would probably call, like, I wouldn't say mild spoilers, but like, I'm going to talk about a little bit of things in the book, right? That like, if you just pick it up and you read the page without knowing anything about it, that you won't know. But I'm not going to give away any major plot details, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you what happens, what the ending is. But I'm just going to talk about things in the book that sort of help prove my point of what I'm talking about without really giving away the plot too much. And then at the end, when I'm done giving my thoughts without major spoilers, I am going to talk about the ending of this book, and there will be a big spoiler warning. So whatever spoiler level you feel comfortable with, you can watch up to. And also, the second thing, I don't really, I'm more of a fantasy reader. And I don't watch like a lot of murder mysteries either in terms of like TV. So this is a genre that I'm not really super familiar with. So like, if you want me to, expect me to judge it up against other murder mystery books, I'm not really able to do that. This is, really out of pocket for me. So I just wanted to get that all out of the way and before we go further. So if you're wondering what actually happens in this book, I mean, saying it's just a murder mystery doesn't really do the book any justice. So the main character, who's the name is kind of a spoiler, but it's also written on, because you don't get the reveal for the name until, I don't want to say halfway, because it's a little less, and you don't get the reveal of the name until a decent amount of way through the book, but it says the name of the book on the back, right here. So, I'll just, you go ahead and say it. Aiden Bishop wakes up as Dr. Sebastian Bell in the middle of the woods. Dr. Sebastian Bell is a guest attending this party where someone will be murdered. I think it's pretty obvious who will be murdered based off of the title. Called Evelyn, and he has amnesia. He doesn't really remember anything about who he is, and he's kind of just wandering throughout the day trying to figure out what's going on, and then the next day he wakes up and he's somebody else. Aiden wakes up and he's somebody else. In this case, he's like the head butler, and but it's not like it's sort of a weird time loop where it's the same day. It's not like he's not Sebastian Bell anymore, right? It's not like Sebastian Bell returns to himself not possessed by Aiden on this day. No, all these days are happening simultaneously. And that's something he learns very, very quickly with the butler. And so his goal that, sort of unravels as the book happens is he has to figure out who the murderer is, right? At a fancy ball, Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered, and what Aiden has to figure out in the 8 days, that's 5, 8 days, I prefer, this looks better, 8 days, is who committed the murder. And so it's really interesting because you sort of have that murder mystery, but there's a lot more to it also, where you slowly uncover throughout the book that Aiden's trapped against his will here, right? And it's kind of like that Doctor Who episode, Heaven Sent. I actually was reminded of that episode a lot with this book. If you don't really know what, haven't seen that episode, you don't really know what I'm talking about. First off, you should. That episode is amazing. It's one of the best Doctor Who episodes I've ever seen. But the basic idea of this episode is, Peter Capaldi's doctor wakes up in this abandoned castle, and, he's trying to figure out why he's trapped here, what's going on, what the deal is. A lot like Aiden is, right? Because Aiden doesn't really know what's going on. And Capaldi, he figures out eventually that he's being trapped here against his will, and that he's been doing it for thousands of years, right? Like, there's been a bunch of past selves that have done this before, and it's just kind of getting reset and reset and reset and reset and reset and reset and reset, every time he fails. And eventually what happens in that episode is at the ending, he busts out. He resets millions, if not billions of times. He's trapped there for like 4.5 billion years, they say. So at the very least hundreds of millions of times he does the reset and he busts out. And I was reminded of that episode a lot with this book, because it's something Aiden discovers, just like the doctor in that episode discovers that he's one of many and that he's experienced this, thousands, or by the end millions of times. Aiden discovers that he's in a similar situation, and a lot of that has to do with the plague doctor, who is someone from the outside world who has supervised this. And that's sort of where he figures it out, is by the questions the plague doctor and by the question Aiden asks the plague doctors and plague doctor, and the way he answers it, and sort of the way he responds to events like he's seen it hundreds of times. You really get the feeling that this is not a one-time occurrence, and that for whatever reason Aiden is trapped here and has been, gone through this loop a bunch of times. And it's something that's said in the beginning, towards the beginning, is that if he doesn't solve it at the end of all 8 days, his memory is reset and he's done it again. And then as you find out more, you get more the implication that has happened to him a bunch of times. So it's this weird murder mystery time loop heaven sent thing, and it's quite an interesting premise, and that's really what inspired me to buy it. Was at the time, and this is still true, I just have a lot of that I feel like I want to read. I don't know that I will make videos on everything, but definitely Lord of the Rings for sure. I already started doing that. And I wasn't really looking for anything new, but I read the blurb. I was in a Barnes & Noble, I enjoy that store and hang out there. And it caught my eye, and I read a couple pages, and I was really intrigued by it. I was really intrigued by the premise. The premise was really, really interesting to me, especially as a giant Doctor Who fan who sort of geeks out on that time travel craziness. And so I was intrigued and I bought it. And so that's one thing I want to commend this book for. The premise, I think, is really, really good. The only flaw, or I guess the biggest flaw with the premise of the book is that, like, if you don't have a head for time travel shenanigans, I could see this being really confusing. Now, it just so happens that, again, I'm a extremely huge Doctor Who fan. I love that show. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So, and something I love, I will definitely talk about this more when I do a 15th Doctor season review, which will definitely happen at some point. I'm pretty behind right now, though. But is that I love the wibbly-wobbly aspect of it. Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. Like, I love the way things happen out of order and things, connect weirdly, like the whole River Song thing. Like, I love that idea. And it's because when you get time travel involved, right? The Doctor's constantly traveling in time. Things like that are bound to happen. You're bound to see things in, the wrong order. You're bound to experience things like that. That's just the nature of what happens. When you travel in time and people around you aren't traveling in time, or they're traveling in a different way, in a different order, you're going to meet in different orders and things are going to happen in a weird way. And so that's something that happens a lot in this book, is things just happen out of order, right? Like, something may happen and then you may be wondering, oh, why did this happen? That's kind of weird. And then you find out later on, when Aiden revisits the events as a different person, he shows up at a different time, he finds out the real answer. And there's a lot of connections like that through this book. And while I could see people finding that confusing, if you don't have your head wrapped around that kind of stuff, definitely could be confusing. But for me, I absolutely loved it. Genuinely loved it. I loved seeing all the connections between Aiden's different, I don't want to say characters, forms, whatever you want to say, hosts. That's the term they use. I loved the different connections between the different hosts and seeing what they do, and kind of, as the book progresses and Aiden goes through more and more hosts, you get more and more connections back to the earlier parts of the book where you're wondering, oh, why did this happen? Like, this is a weird detail that happened in the second or third host. Why did that happen? And then you find out in like host 6 or 7 that Aiden actually weirdly caused that to happen, right? Like, whether intentionally or inadvertently, there's a lot of weird connections like that. And again, that's the one flaw with the premise, which is it can kind of feel like a lot. Like, if you don't have your head ready for some wibbly wobbly timey wiminess, then I could definitely see this book being a lot and being confusing. But personally, I loved it. Genuinely loved it. I love that aspect of it. So, next thing is, let's actually talk about Anna now. I just brought her up. She is a very interesting character. Her and Aiden's fate they're very intertwined in this book. And a large reason of that is because Aiden woke up with that name, with the name Anna on his mind, and that sort of guided him to her, and to work together. And he makes a promise to her that they're going to escape Blackheath together. He's going to find a way, even though the rules that's established, by the Plague Doctor, who, again, he's kind of overseeing it, and I'm calling him Plague Doctor because that's what he's called in the book, and he has a Plague Doctor outfit on. this clearly says only one can escape. But, they work together and they help each other. And she's really an interesting character because she's very kind. She's really kind-hearted. And, she's really sweet and helps out Aiden in any way she can, even though she knows, because she knows the rules too. She knows that, she's helping out her competitor and that may be dooming herself, but she has trust that he's going to find a way, or at the very least, that he's going to find a way to escape for himself. That one of them will be able to leave. And she's a really interesting character because she's like River Song. Like, that's sort of the best way I can do it, because she meets everyone out of order, right? She meets all the hosts in all the different orders, as Aiden is in all different forms of progression, and she has to act like she doesn't know his future, or she doesn't know what's coming, or like she didn't see a future version of him, just not that long ago. But she's really nice and really supportive. I don't know, she's sweet. She's a good character. She's someone that I feel like is easy to like, because of that. Because she helps out the main character, and because she's really friendly, and because she's doing something that probably does not benefit her, right? That you would think wouldn't benefit her, at least, is by helping out her competition so that her competition can leave. But the fact that she's still willing to do it, in fact, that's something that's said really early on in her version of the day, is, it's one of the last hosts for Aiden, but it's something that he says very early on to her, which is, I'm going to try to get us both out, but, that's kind of against the rules, so I don't really know. I don't really know what's going to happen, Anna. I'm going to do the best I can, but there's no guarantee. Are you still okay with working with me? And she says, yes. And so that in of itself is really, it's really noble that she would be basically willing to give her life to let somebody else go. And I don't know, that's really commendable. And the biggest reason why Aiden needs Anna's help is because there's someone called the Footman. I mean, he is a footman, but he is obviously he's the last competitor. He has someone else inhabit him, and he's trying to kill all of Aiden's hosts, because if Aiden's host dies, he's immediately moved to the next one. That's it for the day. So by killing off the hosts, it gives Aiden much harder time, right? He has much less free time to be able to, solve the murder and escape. So that's something they're constantly, battling together. I mean, Anna gives Aiden information, or what information she can, although Aiden has more information because he has more time. But, they help each other the best they can. But that is the biggest thing, is she just, want to keep each other safe. They both have each other's back in that way, because the Footman is after her too. He wants to kill everyone, just so he has the best chance of trying to escape. But they're able to then help each other in that sense, not die. And so, yeah. Also, last thing before I really delve into spoilers more, I want to talk about Aiden's host. One thing that's really interesting about the host is that Aiden, it's partially himself, but partially the host too. Like, the hosts have their own personality, and they, that personality, I don't want to say it like takes over, because that's not really entirely true, but it's like he's sharing his mind with the person, and they're all different people, right? So Belle is like a lonely doctor who's kind of a coward. So that's what he is in his first go around. Then he's the head butler who thinks very differently than Belle, and sort of something that goes on throughout the book is he sees things in very different ways because he processes information, right? Like the hosts process information differently. So it's like there are times where he'll experience the same event as a different person and he'll come away with a different conclusion. Or he'll use an event in a different way and come away, with a different conclusion. And that's really like a huge advantage that he has over Anna and the Footman, is being able to experience these events through different eyes. And because also, what's also interesting about the hosts is the hosts they have some predetermined things going on throughout the day. I'm trying to think. Belle doesn't really have that much because he lost his memory. So I'm trying to, but the most obvious example is the sixth host, which again I don't really want to give away because they're kind of like twists of their own as they keep going. But the sixth host has, he starts out his day having a meeting with, not Thomas Hardcastle. Let me double check. Something that is really helpful with this book, by the way, is this invitation. It's like a mock invitation of the party you were invited to, and it has like all the relevant characters on it are listed here. So, including all the hosts, by the way. So, if you're ever confused about a character's name or something, it's very nice that you can just scan this again. Peter Hardcastle, that's Evelyn's father. So his sixth host has a meeting with Evelyn's father. And so that lets him, sort of question him and figure everything out, right? Like, sort of doing these meetings, the hosts, they have their own obligations, and that puts him in different spots throughout the day. So he's able to look at things at all different angles, and because the hosts think differently, he processes the information differently. So it really gives him much more opportunities to put the murder together, to put everything together. And it's really clever and really well done. How you see everything through all these different perspectives. So yeah, that's really, I don't really feel like I can say much more else before talking about spoilers. So this is going to be, before I do, spoiler warning and I go into all that, I will give, closing thoughts, I guess, before I really dive into spoilers. But would I recommend this book? If time travel shenanigans aren't too much for you, I definitely would recommend this book. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I really enjoyed watching it all come together. I think that was honestly my favorite part of the book, was all, again, kind of the time travel stuff I was talking about. Watching everything come together, right? Watching all the connections, between this happened in the third day and this relates to this in the fifth day, and everything like that. Watching everything come together was really a joy, and Turin, must have had a big spreadsheet, or I imagine he's like a wall, with all these notes and all these connections of how everything comes together, and that's what it really feels like. And you know, it sort of reminds me of how I talked about in my Fellowship of the Ring video, how Tolkien had an idea of the lore of Middle-earth, you know, before he even started writing a page. Turin had an idea of, you know, what he wanted, you know, of everything going on in the house before he even set down a page. And you know, it felt like with writing, he was more so deciding, how do I unravel this, right? Like, how do I unveil? How do I slowly give the clues leading to the conclusion? And that, for me, was definitely the best part of this book. The wibbly-wobbly, timey-wiminess, all the connections, everything like that was, for me, really, really fun. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend this book. You know, now I'm going to talk about spoilers, and I'm going to talk about ending. The one thing I will say about the ending, before I give the full spoiler warning, is I could see it being pretty decisive. You know, that's the only thing I'm going to say about the ending, is I could see people not liking it, but that wasn't, you know, that wasn't really me. But yeah, that's so you know, I'm sure people, if you know this got made into a show, I'm sure people would be upset by the ending, but it's not like it came out of nowhere either. So I don't know. That's really all I'm going to say. So now I am going to do full spoiler warning. You know, through the spoiler flashing across the screen, whatever else, you know, I need to do. I'm going to be fully talking about spoilers from here on to the rest of the video. If you do not want to hear about the ending of this book, click off now. But so that's it. Full spoiler warning. Here we go. Okay, so now I have an interesting question. What do I talk about first? Seriously, there's a lot I want to talk about with the ending of this book, and all the twists and turns that come about. First thing I want to mention, and you should notice I avoid talking about the Footman a ton. The twist with Daniel Coolidge. I did not touch on him at all in my spoiler-free section. And there's a reason for it, because to me that was one of the bigger twists before you actually get to the final twist of the book. So there was someone that helped out in, you know, Dan. You don't actually find out what his true name is. You know, right? Aiden and Anna, you know, those are their actual true names from the real life world. You don't find out what the deal is with Daniel. But you know that the Footman, the twist, okay, well, first off, before you even get to the twist, let me set up the twist. So, in Aiden's fourth host, Ravencourt, you know, who's this, he's this banker, and he doesn't have a lot of mobility. He's a big dude, but, you know, he uses his logic. You know, he's a very logical, very analytical person, and that's how he uses his self, his body, I guess you could say, to get information. Is to use it, brains over bronze. Definition. He is the definition of brains over bronze. And something he does is he asks for help from his future hosts, because he basically thinks, hey, if I can get information from my host on the 8th day and he can tell me everything he knows, this will make solving the murder, you know, easier, because then I will have all this extra time. And when he does that, he is met with Daniel Coolidge, and Daniel Coolidge is a character that has been introduced early on. It's one of the first characters you're introduced to besides Sebastian Bell. He's like a famous gambler. He has a lot of money, you know, a lot of connections, and you don't know that. You discover that. You don't know that. But his first introduction is talking with Sebastian Bell, who is Aiden's first host, and, you know, kind of calming him down and everything like that. That's his introduction. And then now you are told that this is Aiden's final host. And he felt a little suspicious to me. I didn't question it at first, like Ravencourt did. I should also say, by the way, I gave up on trying to figure out who the murderer was. And, you know, again, I don't really read murder mysteries that much, and I started to in the beginning, but eventually I just started to appreciate the ride more, and so I just kind of just read to just enjoy it and see what happens and see how it all came together. But I was a little, I don't want to say suspect is the right word of Daniel Coleridge. What I was more concerned about with him was how little time he had. I'll explain what I mean in a second. Sorry, I just moved my computer a little bit, but just so I can plug it in. But yeah, the one thing I was most concerned about with Daniel was the time, and it's because this book seemed to operate under the same. Well, my mic's in a different spot now, by the way. I don't know that that affects audio, but you know, it sort of seems to operate under the rule of Moffat's Doctor Who, where if you know your future, you have to kind of fulfill that, or else it would create a paradox. I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know. Well, it's something that wasn't really done, but especially, I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, here is one of them. At the end of the book, where in order to escape being hurt by the Footman, Gregory Gold, who is the final host, beats up his second host, the butler, to send them to it's like the old, like the shed. So it's an abandoned shed, kind of. And that was to prevent them from being attacked by the Footman. It was something that Aiden experienced first as the butler, before he really realized anything that was going on. And then when he was as Gold, it was something he had to fulfill because he had already seen it done numerous times. And he knew that not doing so would break a paradox. I mean, it's not really, he did it because he knew he had to survive. But it was one of those things where, again, he's seen it done, his past has interacted with it, that it would change everything to mess it up. Another one is Belle getting help, you know, from the wood. Belle getting led to the house from the woods. You know, he gets, in the beginning, he gets directions, he gets a compass and directions on where to go. And then you find out that that's Aiden's future self. And that if he didn't do that, you know, and he's questioning doing that when the moment came. Because he was sick and tired of the game and he wanted out. You sort of realize if you don't do that, everything unravels, right? Like, you know, you're going to completely change your past. You're going to rewrite everything if you don't do that. So you kind of have to do that. And so my thing with Daniel was so much of the day, especially after that meeting, you know, was intertwined. So much of it was intertwined with Aiden's other hosts. So you have the meeting with Ravencourt, and you have the meeting with Belle, both meetings. You know, you have him with Stanwin, you have, you know, both meetings, and he's there, right, no, yeah. Yeah, you have him with the meeting with Ravencourt, then shortly after, he does, meet with Belle again, and you see him in the lunchroom. Then shortly after that, he goes hunting and kills Ted Stanwin. Then after that, he's at dinner, you know, with everybody else. And then before all of this, he had a meeting with Sebastian Bell, and he claimed, even though this, fine, spoiler alert, this wasn't true, that he fought with the Footman in between a lot of this stuff. So that was my concern with Coleridge. I felt Aiden was shooting himself in the foot by intertwining himself so much with his past lives. I was like, well, then you have no real free time to investigate because you're spending so much time getting intertwined with your past selves, and you're going to have to fulfill that to complete the loop. So I thought that was really stupid, and I really did not like that on Aiden's part. And so that was the closest I ever got to really being suspicious of Coleridge. But then you have the reveal. I never really thought Coleridge wasn't who he said he was until he wakes up as the seventh host, which is Rashton. That was really threw me off. So, because in Dance, when he wakes up as Dance, the sixth host, he gets a cryptic message from Gregory Gold saying, "Don't get out of the carriage. He's gonna cut you to pieces." So then you knew by that point Gregory Gold had to be a future host. And so I was like, okay, he's gonna have to be, Gregory Gold must be 7 then, right? He must be the 7th host, and then Daniel has to be the last one. And so, I was so sure I was right about this, because I was like, it doesn't make sense otherwise. How else would this make sense? It's the only way it fits logically. And so then when he woke up and then he was Rashton, the police, the 7th host, and he was Rashton, the police officer, I was just like, how is this right? Like, this can't be right. Because then Gold's the last host? I was like, Gold's the last host? How does that make any sense? Coleridge said it was him. And so I was just confused, but I kept reading, and, it's nice when, I talked about this, with Thrawn in sort of Star Wars Rebels, it's nice when you say something, you say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Like, how does this make any sense? And then the protagonist immediately goes, this doesn't make any sense. Right? Like the same thing that I was talking about. And that's what happens. Right? So then Aiden puts together that Coleridge is obviously not his final host. And so you have that. And then he realizes, oh, he's not on my side then. He must be the other competitor. He must be working with the Footman. That's what he thought, right? He thought he was working with the Footman. But, like, he's not who he said. He doesn't know who he is at that point, but he knows he's not who he says he is. And then you have the reveal a little bit later on that he is the Footman. He's not really the Footman, but the Footman wasn't the other person who was trapped with him. The Footman wasn't the contestant. It's not really the right word, but it was Daniel, and Daniel was the one who hired the Footman to kill everyone. And so I thought that was really well done. Again, there were enough hints there that something was wrong, and then sort of put it together that okay, he's obviously not who he says he is, right? He's suspicious. And I thought that reveal was well done. I enjoyed that. Okay, so that was to me the second biggest twist in the book that I want to talk about. Now we're going to get into the biggest one. The biggest twist of them all. The ending. I don't know how much I'm going to talk about it, but I do want to shine some light onto it. Okay, so the biggest question for me was, what is this hell that he's in? Like, why are they trapped here? And to me, I was more focused on that ending than the actual ending of who committed the murder. So actually, I'm going to talk about who committed the murder first, before I even get into any of that. Evelyn Hardcastle is a horrible, 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 horrible person. That really explains everything now, doesn't it? So the biggest twist at the end of the book is that the Evelyn Hardcastle that you know that you're trying to save is actually not Evelyn Hardcastle. And again, this is something that was laid out. Okay. Well, there are multiple twists, but that's sort of the biggest twist. And again, it's not like you didn't see I didn't see this specifically coming, but what I did see was that there was a puzzle piece that really didn't make sense, and it was Felicity Maddox, who was this person that Evelyn hired to sort of as a protector from her parents, because she thought her parents were going to do something to her. According to Evelyn, her parents were going to do something to her because she let her little brother die. According to her parents, because her little brother was murdered like 10 years ago, before the events of the book. And so that's what happens. I mean, so, you know, there's that little puzzle piece left where you're not sure how it fits, and it's revealed that Evelyn, that we thought was actually Felicia Maddox, and that the real Evelyn pretended to be Evelyn's maid. And they did that swap so Evelyn could be killed, and that so she could get away with murder. That's basically the twist of the book. The biggest twist of the book. So Evelyn killed her brother, the little brother. She unintentionally killed her actual normal brother who survived. She killed both her parents. She killed everyone. And she did kill Felicity too, although that was undone by Aiden. So yeah, she's a killer. She killed everyone. That's a twist. I don't know how I feel about this twist. Again, it's not like the puzzle pieces weren't there. It's not like one of those things where it came out of the blue, but you know, enough stuff was there, and they provide the hints at the end of the book, you know, because Aiden figured that out, and he says why he figured it out. So they lay out the clues as to, you know, that something fishy was going on. But I don't know, it feels a little lame. Like, again, I get it, and it's sort of mind-bending and whatnot, but it, you know, like, if you were to tell someone the ending of this book, which I guess I just did, and you were to hear without context that Evelyn wasn't the real Evelyn, and she turned out the real Evelyn was a psychotic murderer who killed everybody, which is the final twist. You kind of be like, that's kind of lame, dude. Like, that doesn't sound that interesting. And that's kind of how I feel. Like, I think it worked because of all the build-up. I think it worked because of all the build-up and all the clues that were laid out here. Again, because it's not like it came out of the blue. As I said, he knew where he wanted to go with all of the story before he wrote a single page. So it's not like that. It's just it feels a little anticlimactic that the person you're trying to save actually isn't her. And I think it takes away a little bit from that, right? So because Belle makes a bond with who he thinks is Evelyn Hardcastle, but now that we know is Felicia Maddox. And that's part of the reason why he wants to save her so badly, is because he feels she was unjustly killed, and he wants to undo that, you know, on top of his own salvation, of course. And so having that reveal that the person he's trying to save was a selfish asshole, because she was just taking money. She was just taking money to do this, and B, the real person that, you know, he was actually really trying to save was a psychotic murderer. I don't know. It feels like it kind of undoes that a little bit. And I get it. Again, it was all done. It was laid out well, but it feels a little anticlimactic for me. I don't know. I don't hate it, but I don't feel like this was the best ending that could have happened. That could have been done. That's really how I feel about it. Okay, on to the actual real twist. So, what is it that they're trapped in? Is it hell? Is it purgatory? It is none of the above. It is a prison. It is a maximum security prison. And that's not really I mean, it's a twist, but it's not, because you sort of knew, you gathered enough clues that they were trapped against their will. You didn't really know why, but you knew that they were trapped. So they were trapped, and, you know, it was being supervised, and there was a lot of repeats. So you knew jail is not that surprising. I thought it was something closer to purgatory. If you asked me, that would have been my guess. But like I said, I really just enjoyed the ride. But I don't know. That reveal isn't really the reveal. I don't say I have a problem with it, but that really isn't the reveal that I want to talk about. The reveal is, because then you have to think, it's a maximum security prison. Why are they there? And this is the reveal that when I said I could see people hating the ending to this book, this is the part that I think people would hate, which is Anna basically on the outside world. When she was put into the prison, she was either like the equivalent to Osama bin Laden or German mustache man. Like, you don't get a ton of details, and that's something I wish we got more of the outside world at the ending. But you don't, you find out she killed a bunch of people, inspired people to kill a bunch of people, and that's why she was trapped in this almost impossible to get out situation. Almost impossible to get out situation. But, something that's said at the end, and Aiden, why did Aiden go in there? Because they said he volunteered. Annabelle Cocker, which is Anna's real name, killed Aiden's sister, and Aiden couldn't get over that, so he wanted to go in and to make Anna's life hell, and they've been trapped in there for 30 years. That's the real twist of the book. Obviously, the Evelyn stuff too, but I became way more interested in that part rather than Evelyn. Who committed the murder. And this twist, it's interesting. It sort of reminds me of, there was this thing in bio that I learned, back in the day, that when DNA replicates itself, like, it doesn't do a perfect replication, and so part of the end of the strand is lost, like a little bit, like a tiny bit, like each time. And that's why when you're born, your DNA has a bunch of extra characters. I don't know if that's the right term. Like the strand is made extra long, so that when it replicates, you lose the part that doesn't matter. But then eventually it gets to the part that actually kind of does matter, and that's part of the reason why for aging. I could be wrong with this, but I just remember hearing that, and I remember learning that, and that's sort of what I was reminded of with this ending. Because what the ending says is Anna and Aiden, and first off, before I even talk about Anna, something that is established as the book goes on is that Aiden has been through this so much that he is losing himself. That whatever little bit, that whenever, here's the DNA metaphor comes in, is that whenever when they erase his memory after each reset, he loses a little bit of himself each time. A little bit of the original version of himself is lost in time, in memory. And so this Aiden that we're presented with is a tiny fragment of the real Aiden, because you have to remember, this was done every day for 30 years. At least it said about 30 years. So let's just do some quick math. Calculator. 365 times 30. So that is 10,950 times that his memory was erased. At least 10,950 times. And every time it's done, just a little bit, just a tiny bit, not that much, right? Like, for every single time, maybe not that much of Aiden was lost. But a sliver, was lost every single time. And then when you do that for 10,950 times, just double checking it's a number, that little sliver becomes a whole lot. And it's something he said that the hosts are taking over. Aiden can only do it so much before the host's personality completely takes over. But it's also just him, right? Like, so much of who he originally was lost. That he's not, even without the host, he's not the same person anymore. He's like a completely different person. That original Aiden Bishop was eroded away after 10,950 resets. I want to double check this number. Yep. So, after 10,950 resets, that original version of Aiden Bishop was eroded away so much that it's not him anymore. And that's something that they present, in the book as it's going on with Aiden. And that's something they say with Anna, too. Right? And she doesn't even remember being a serial killer. She doesn't remember any of that. And when you look at her actions throughout the book, like, there are times where she does resort to brutality, and that's kind of just her instincts. I mean, well, I wouldn't say brutality. She handles a gun like it's nobody's business. Like, she doesn't really show that much remorse. There are one or two times where she does kill somebody. It's not Aiden, where she does kill somebody, but she doesn't really love that she has to do it, but she does it, instinctually. Like, she doesn't really think about it. That's really everything that remains of Annabelle Cocker, the serial killer, mass murderer, whatever you want to describe her, a terrorist. Was just that little sense of brutality, but the original Annabelle Cocker's personality has eroded so much away. She's not the same person. That same person just wouldn't have been as nice and as kind to Aiden. She would have just tried to do everything she could to just escape. And it reminds me of the Doctor Who episode Twice Upon a Time. I know I'm making a lot of Doctor Who references today, but in that episode, something that is talked about with that episode is that a lot of who we are is just memories. Right? A lot of what makes us is our experience and our memories. That changes who we are as a person, how we have this outlook on stuff. And that's something that's actually presented in Aiden's journey through the different hosts. Is so much of how the hosts view things is based off of their past experience and their past memories, and that's so much of how Aiden views things. That's so much of how he gets lost in this host sometimes, because who they are and their past memories, their past experience shaped them. And so without those same memories, those same experiences, that is why the original Aiden is lost. Because all those memories, all that core is buried so far deep within him that he's not really him anymore. And the same thing goes with Anna. At least that's what the book presents us. I want to be clear, I'm not really in favor of Osama bin Laden's and German mustache mans and all of that. I'm not. They are terrible human beings. But I think what this book asks us is, if you take those memories away from them, would they still be the same person? And at least in this book, the answer is no. And there's this good quote, I added something to the good quote pile. This is when the plague doctor is, explaining everything, explaining the prison. Do you know how you can tell if a monster's fit to walk the earth again, Mr. Bishop? If they're truly redeemed and not just telling you what you want to hear? You give them a day without consequences and watch to see what they do with it. And Annabelle Cocker would not have been ready to go, would not have been redeemed. She would not have done anything good with her day without consequences, but Anna did. You know, Anna stripped so much out of her memories, did. You know, like I talked about, you know, there's a reason why I presented her the way I presented her in my spoiler-free section. And that was for this ending, so I can talk about this ending, so I can set up this ending in the same way that the book did. The book seems to think that Anna now, you know, did not, you know, she used her day without consequences well. You know, she didn't murder, I mean, she did murder a couple people, but mostly Daniel. Mostly Daniel and, like, random people. But they're all in favor of Aiden. And I don't know, it's an interesting question to see whether she was truly redeemed. And it's something that the book leaves up in air. And that's sort of something else that I really wanted to see with this book, is like some sort of epilogue. I don't know if it's just me, because I had the same problem when I watched Knives Out. The first one, I have not seen Glass Onion at this point in time. Is the twist happens and it just ends. And it felt a little anticlimactic when your whole book, a whole movie is building up to that twist. To have the twist just happen and to have it just end, be like, okay, that's it. Felt a little anticlimactic, and especially with this. So the book ends with Aiden and Anna, they do get free. They are free. You know, with the twist that Evelyn Hardcastle wasn't who she says she was, and she is actually killed by Felicia Maddox. At the end, Anna is able to give the name of Felicia Maddox to set her free, and Aiden solved enough of the puzzle that the Plague Doctor took his, you know, answers as worthy of their freedom. What was I gonna say? Oh, I wanted to see what would happen after that. Like, genuinely, I wanted something, a little bit, anything. You know, obviously the reception that Annabelle Cocker escaped was not going to be good, but I wanted to see Anna. I wanted to see how she would react to all of this. I wanted to see whether she was changed, whether she is different, because it kind of leaves you open-ended. Like, you don't fully know if she is redeemed. You know, the book seems to lean more yes than no, but I would like some sort of, I want to know what she does when she is faced with who she was. You know, all this stuff is stuff I'm very intrigued by. And it's just, you know, who is Aiden actually Aiden? Not with all the hosts, like, when we don't get an answer. And that's a little disappointing to me. I wish we had gotten something. But I don't know. You know, like, even if it's just like an epilogue, like what happened in the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows, where you just get like a little chapter. Even though, I mean, that chapter eventually led to a play, but, you know, before all that happened. Like, I wanted something, I wanted a little taste. I don't need a whole sequel novel, I wanted a little taste. I wanted some of those questions answered, and I think it would have provided a more satisfying ending. Because, like I said, maybe this is the genre, the murder mystery genre, because I've had this experience with this book and Knives Out, but the book kind of just ends. Right? The twist happens, that's it, goodbye, go read something else. It's like, no, I want the chance to let the twist settle. I want to see how to react and everything like that. It just happens. I don't know. That was something I was a little disappointed by. Also, last thing I want to talk about before I really head out is the prison system itself, right? So this was the maximum security prison, but the Plague Doctor says there are a bunch of other, like, smaller, low-scale prisons. And the one thing I want to talk about first, before, you know, you leave, is sort of the prison system. And especially because, you know, so one of the Plague Doctor's co-workers, a twist at the end, infiltrates, you know, she comes in and gives Daniel Coleridge all the information that she knows about Aiden's other hosts, and in exchange, he will prevent Anna from leaving. to murder Anna. And it's because she doesn't want Annabelle Cocker escaping. She doesn't want her leaving, and it doesn't matter about redemption. And I'm not really going to answer, I already talked about that discussion about whether she could be redeemed, how much of it depends on memory, how, is she really not, like she seems like she's not the same person anymore. But, you have that little savagery of how easily she handles a gun, and how much of it defines memory. I think I talked about a lot for that discussion. I'm going to leave it for yourself, like the book does. In the honor of the book, I'm going to leave it to yourself for you to decide whether you think she is fully redeemed or not. But I think I've provided enough discussion points for that, talking points for that discussion, that I'm not really going to, I don't know how much I'm going to say about it. But the thing is, she doesn't want her Anna escaping, and so she's trying to sabotage it, basically. And I think if that's how you feel and you never want Annabelle Cocker escaping, you should have put her in a prison that is inescapable. Because then you're just not playing by the rules. I understand that the murder is insanely hard and that Aiden only got it because he had all the hosts, and the only reason he got all the other hosts was because he shouldn't have been put there in the first place. He did not commit a crime. And that's why the plague doctor helped him. And I get all that, but it still took him 30 years to escape. So I get that Anna was probably not going to escape without Aiden's help, most likely. But you don't know that. She could just get lucky. There are thousands and thousands of resets. In 30 years, the reset was 10,000, almost 11,000 times. If she was there for 30 more years, that would be almost 22,000, right? Like, all it takes is for her to get lucky with one day. One day she stumbles upon the answer and is able to leave. That's all it takes. And it could have been on day 2. That 0.0000001% chance could have happened on day 2. And then, the plague doctor is held by the laws of Blackheath. That's what he says. And if someone provides him the answer, they should be allowed to leave because that's the rules that they were told, right? I'm trying to think of like an example to say what I was saying, but I don't know. It's like it's goalposts moving, right? It's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. It's hard to really give a good example. I don't know. I'm really struggling with my metaphors today. I'm sorry about that. But like, that's just not fair because, something that Anna and Daniel, when they wake up, they have the rules burned into them that if they solve the murder and give the name, they are able to leave. They're able to escape. And so if Anna gives a name, she should be allowed to leave because that's the rules of the prison. And if you don't want her escaping, don't put her in a prison that she can escape. Put her in Azkaban, right? Azkaban was escape too. That's not really the greatest example, but you know what I mean. Put her in some place that for sure can't escape, which they probably have the technology to do if they put her in something like this. But otherwise, to do so is not fair. It's just not. Live by the rules, die by the rules. If you don't like that, change the rules. That's just the reality. Last thing I want to touch on about the prisons, and then I will really be done. Would this kind of system work? Genuinely, would this kind of system work? I really don't know. Maybe it will redeem people, but they lose their memories, right? They have the option to regain their memories when they escape. But the plague doctor says most people choose not to. Is that really redeeming them, though? Like, if your goal is to redeem people, you're not really redeeming them. You're replacing their memory with something else. You know, you're erasing the previous person and replacing them with someone new. Right? That's what I just talked about with Anna and Aiden and their whole memory thing. They're not the same person. Now, obviously, Anna has a little bit of her brutality left over, but in the book, she's presented as a kind, nice, generous person. She's willing to give her life for Aiden. You know, at the end of the book, she literally is willing to give her life up so Aiden can escape. But just by agreeing to help him, knowing that there's a good chance only Aiden can escape, she is literally giving up her life to help him. And she doesn't have any memory of Annabelle Cocker, right? Like, she's a different person. That Annabelle Cocker was erased. And that's why I don't know. Like, what is your goal of your prison? Of what is the goal of doing something like this? If the goal of the prison is to redeem someone, then if you're not doing that, you're erasing the previous person and replacing them with someone else. That is what you're doing. If your goal is to put better people into society, maybe you do that? It's hard to really tell because we only get a glimpse into Blackheath. You know, the maximum security prison where they've been trapped in for 30 years. In order to really answer that question, I feel like you would have to look at the lower level prisons where people are trapped in there, I don't know, weeks to a month. And really see, with their new memories, are these people better? How many repeat offenders are there? I don't really feel like we have enough information to really know that. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if this makes better people, if this system makes better people. I don't know. This is a really tough, complicated question. I don't know if this prison system would work. I don't know if this would be the best way forward. The one thing I do know, as I talked about earlier, is if you want a prison where people can't escape, where no one's supposed to escape, don't make it so that they have the option to escape, even if it's a slim 1% chance. Live by the rules, die by the rules, otherwise you're just being unfair. And I really do believe that. Like, if you want Annabelle Cocker in prison for the rest of her life, you should have just thrown her in a prison. Even if it's one of these simulation prisons. You should have just thrown her in there without a chance to escape. And just let that be that. But otherwise, you have the possibility for her to escape. I don't know. It's interesting. There's definitely a lot of interesting things to talk about with this book. And I quite enjoyed it. I would say read it, although now that I've spoiled the twist for you, maybe you don't want to read it. Because I literally spoiled the ending. But like I said right before I did the spoiler section, I think the build-up was the most fun part of this book. Seeing how all the pieces came together, that to me was the best part of this book. So I would recommend reading it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I do not read mystery novels though, so maybe compared to other mystery novels it's bad. I don't know. I enjoyed it. And that's really all I got. So thank you everyone for watching. Look at this graph. I'm gonna try a new outro. I don't know how much I like it, but I'm out, guys. I'm Alec. This has been awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.